The Galactic Concord had kept peace among the stars for 12,000 years. It was the greatest achievement in the history of known space. 47 different species sat together in the High Council. They came from worlds of ice and fire, from gas giants and ocean moons. Some breathed oxygen, others breathed methane or ammonia. Some had scales, others had feathers, and a few had no solid form at all. Yet they had learned to live together, to trade together, and to solve their problems with words instead of weapons. War had become a thing of the past. Oh, there were small fights here and there, border disputes, trade arguments. But true war, the kind that burned worlds and killed billions, had not happened in over 8,000 years. The Council was proud of this. They believed they had moved beyond such primitive behavior. Then humanity arrived. The first human ship entered Council space 63 years ago. It was a small thing, barely larger than a personal transport. The Etherian patrol that found it thought it was debris at first. When they realized it carried living beings, they were curious. When they learned those beings had traveled for 40 years just to find other life, they were amazed. Humans were strange creatures. They had soft skin that burned easily. They needed very specific temperatures to survive. They could not breathe underwater or fly through vacuum. By all measures, they were one of the weakest species the Council had ever encountered. But they learned fast, so very fast. Within 10 years, humans had reverse-engineered faster-than-light travel. Within 20, they had colonized a dozen worlds. Within 50, they had spread across an entire sector of space. They bred quickly, adapted to harsh environments, and never seemed to stop pushing forward. Where other species would look at a frozen wasteland or a toxic desert and see death, humans saw opportunity. High Chancellor watched the humans with growing concern. He was old, even by Etherian standards. His blue-green scales had faded to gray, and his gill slits wheezed when he breathed. He had led the Council for 300 years, and he had never seen anything quite like these Terrans. "They are like a virus," he said to his advisors one evening. "They spread and multiply without end." "They are merely enthusiastic," said Counselor of the Collective. "They were tall, thin beings with 4 arms and skin like polished wood. They are young. They will calm down in time." "Will they?" shook his head slowly. "I have studied their history. Do you know what they did to their own world? They nearly destroyed it. They fought wars that killed millions of their own kind. They built weapons that could crack the crust of a planet." He paused. "And they used them on themselves." The advisors shifted uncomfortably. Such behavior was almost unthinkable to most Council species. "They have changed," insisted. "They are peaceful now." "They are peaceful because they are weak," replied. "What happens when they are strong?" The question hung in the air like smoke. When humanity requested a seat on the Council, the debate lasted for months. Some species supported them. They thought humans would make good trading partners. They admired their art and music. The machine minds of the Synthesis Collective found human creativity fascinating. But others were afraid. The hegemony, an ancient empire of insect-like warriors, saw humans as a threat. The Etherians worried about the balance of power. They who communicated through psychic bonds found human minds disturbing, chaotic, and loud. In the end, made the decision. "We will grant humanity observer status," he announced. "They may watch our proceedings, they may learn our ways, but they will not vote. They will not speak unless spoken to, and they will remember that they are guests in our house." Ambassador stood in the gallery when he spoke these words. She was a small woman with dark hair and darker eyes. She had been a soldier once, then a diplomat. She had fought in the last war on Earth, the one that finally united humanity under a single government. She knew what her species was capable of, both the good and the bad. She said nothing as delivered his verdict. She simply nodded and took her seat in the observer section, a small platform high above the main chamber where she could watch but not participate. For 5 years, she watched. She watched the council debate trade routes while human merchants waited months for permits. She watched them discuss colony rights while human settlers were land that sat empty. She watched them talk about justice and equality while treating her people like children who could not be trusted with sharp objects. She reported everything back to Earth, every insult, every slight, every moment of casual disrespect. Be patient, the Terran Senate told her. Build relationships, show them we can be trusted. So she was patient. She smiled when council members mocked human customs. She laughed at jokes made at her species' expense. She attended every function, learned every protocol, and never once lost her temper. But she kept records, detailed records. They were the worst. Their ambassador, a massive creature named, seemed to take special pleasure in tormenting her. He would click his mandibles in what passed for laughter whenever she entered a room. He called humans soft ones and suggested they would make good servants. "Your kind breeds quickly," he said to her once at a diplomatic dinner. "That is useful. Strong backs, weak minds. You will serve the hegemony well someday." Smiled and sipped her wine. "Perhaps," she said, "but I wonder, Ambassador, have you ever seen what happens when you corner a weak creature, when you give it no choice but to fight or die?" His compound eyes glittered. "It dies. That is what weak things do." "Sometimes," agreed, "but sometimes it discovers it was never as weak as everyone believed." They laughed and walked away. He thought she was making empty threats. He thought humans were exactly what they appeared to be, soft, fragile, harmless. He would learn differently soon enough. They all would. In the shadows of the galaxy, in the cold space between stars, humanity had been busy. They smiled and bowed and played the role of grateful guests. But behind closed doors, in secret facilities on moons and asteroids that did not appear on any chart, they were building something. Something terrible. Something necessary. The council thought they knew what humans were. They were about to discover how wrong they had been. The outer reach was a wild place. It sat at the edge of council space, far from the comfortable core worlds where the great powers made their homes. The stars there were young and hot. The planets were rough and untamed. Most species avoided it. Humans loved it. In just 30 years, they had built dozens of colonies in the outer reach. They carved cities into frozen moons. They built floating stations above gas giants. They turned barren rocks into farms and factories. The crown jewel was new, a world of blue oceans and green forests that reminded the settlers of the Earth they had never seen. 2 million humans called new home. They had built schools and hospitals. They had planted crops and raised children. They had created something beautiful in the darkness between stars. The hegemony wanted it. The insect empire had claimed the outer reach centuries ago, long before humans existed. They had never bothered to colonize it themselves. The worlds were too cold, the resources too scattered. But now that someone else was using it, they decided they wanted it back. Hive Admiral Al arrived in the Covenant sector with 12 Hive fleets. Each fleet contained thousands of ships, from small fighters to massive carrier vessels the size of mountains. It was the largest military force deployed in Council space in over 1,000 years. "Leave," Al broadcast to the human colonies. "You have 40 cycles to abandon these worlds. Everything you have built now belongs to the hegemony. This is not a negotiation." The colonists sent desperate messages to Earth. They begged for help, for protection, for anything. The Terran government responded immediately. They filed an emergency complaint with the Galactic Council. They demanded intervention. They cited treaties and laws and agreements that were supposed to protect all species in Council space. The Council met to discuss the matter. Ambassador stood in her usual place in the observer gallery. Below her, the representatives of 47 species debated the fate of 2 million human lives. Some spoke in favor of intervention. They noted that they had no legal claim to worlds they had never colonized. They argued that allowing such aggression would set a dangerous precedent. But others disagreed. They claimed they could not sense the emotional truth of human claims, implying that humanity might have provoked the attack. The Synthesis Collective calculated that intervention would cost more than the human colonies were worth, and the Etherians, as always, counseled caution. High Chancellor called for silence. His old voice echoed through the chamber. "The matter is complex," he said. "The hegemony's claim to the outer reach predates human expansion. While their methods are perhaps aggressive, they are not without legal standing." He paused. "Furthermore, humanity has shown a pattern of reckless growth. Perhaps this incident will teach them to be more careful in the future." Felt her hands curl into fists. She had expected this. She had prepared for it, but hearing it still hurt. "The Council will not intervene," continued. "The Terrans may negotiate directly with the hegemony for the return of their people. We will offer our services as mediators if both parties agree." On the chamber floor, Ambassador clicked his mandibles in triumph. His compound eyes found in the gallery, and he made a gesture that needed no translation. Humans were beneath notice. Humans were prey. The council members began to disperse, already moving on to other business. For them, this was a minor matter. 2 million lives. What were 2 million lives compared to the stability of an empire that had lasted 12,000 years? Remained standing. She did not move. She did not speak. She simply waited. One by one, the council members noticed her stillness. They paused. They turned. Something in her posture made them uncomfortable, though they could not say what. "Ambassador," said finally, "did you wish to address the council?" "No," she said. Her voice was calm, too calm. "The council has made its position clear. You will not help us. You will not protect us. You will watch us burn and call it a learning experience." "Ambassador, you must understand." "I understand perfectly," she smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "You have taught humanity a valuable lesson today, Chancellor. You have shown us exactly where we stand. You have shown us what the Galactic Conquered truly values." She began walking toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. "The hegemony will destroy you," called out. "Your colonies will fall. Your people will scatter. And when it is over, you will come crawling back to beg for scraps at our table." Stopped at the door. She turned back to face the chamber, her eyes sweeping across the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. "You are right about one thing," she said. "Something is about to be destroyed. Something is about to fall." Her smile widened. "But I do not think it will be us." She walked out. The doors closed behind her. 12 hours later, Earth went dark. Every signal from the Sol system stopped. Every broadcast, every beacon, every communication relay fell silent. Ships that tried to approach were turned away by automated defense platforms. The humans had sealed themselves inside their home system like a creature retreating into its shell. The Council assumed humanity had given up. They believed the Terrans were hiding, waiting for the storm to pass. Some even felt pity for the poor, primitive creatures who had reached too far and paid the price. In the Covenant sector, they began their conquest. They bombed orbital stations. They burned cities. They gave the colonists a choice: surrender and serve, or resist and die. Most surrendered. What else could they do? They were farmers and teachers and builders. They were not warriors. But on Nu, a group of colonists refused to kneel. They armed themselves with whatever they could find, mining lasers and construction tools and hunting rifles. They fought back. They died by the thousands, but they kept fighting. "Why?" Al demanded of a captured human officer. "You cannot win. Your government has abandoned you. Your species has hidden like cowards. Why do you still resist?" The officer was badly wounded. Blood ran down his face and soaked his uniform, but he was still smiling. "You don't understand humans very well, do you?" he said. "We're not hiding, we're preparing." "Preparing for what?" The officer laughed. It was a terrible sound, the laugh of someone who has seen something in the dark and knows it is coming. You'll find out soon enough. Al killed him, but the word stayed in his mind. Preparing. What could the humans possibly be preparing that would make any difference against 12 hive fleets? The answer was traveling toward him at that very moment, moving through the darkness between stars. 7 shapes, 7 nightmares, 7 weapons forged from human desperation and human fury. The Ironborn were awake. And they were hungry. Mars was a red world, cold and dead on the surface. But beneath its rust-colored dust, humanity had built something that no one was supposed to know about. Deep under the northern ice cap, buried in tunnels that did not appear on any official map, lay the tomb of Project Prometheus. Admiral stood at the entrance to the main vault. She was a tall woman with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many battles. She had commanded the Terran Defense Fleet for 15 years. She had fought pirates and rebels and one brief, ugly war with a rogue colony. She thought she had seen everything humanity was capable of. She was wrong. The vault door was 3 meters thick, made from materials that could withstand a nuclear strike. It had not been opened in 217 years. The security codes to unlock it had been passed down through a chain of admirals, each one hoping they would never have to use them. "Are you sure about this?" asked General, her second-in-command. He was a younger man, barely 60, and his hand trembled slightly as he held his. "No," admitted, "but we have no choice. The Council has abandoned us. The hegemony is slaughtering our people. Our regular fleet cannot defeat 12 hive fleets." She placed her hand on the scanner. "The Ironborn are our only hope." The vault door began to open. Cold air rushed out, carrying the smell of machines and something else, something that might have been regret. The chamber beyond was enormous, carved from the living rock of Mars. 7 shapes hung suspended in the darkness, each one held in place by massive support structures. They were ships, but like no ships had ever seen. They were 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that seemed to grow from their hulls like thorns. Their armor was black as night, made from and other materials that humanity had barely begun to understand. But the most disturbing thing was the silence. Normal ships hummed with power, clicked with computer processes, vibrated with engine noise. These ships made no sound at all. They hung in the void like sleeping giants, like corpses. "My God," whispered, "they're beautiful." "They're monsters," corrected. "Necessary monsters, but monsters all the same." She walked to the control station at the center of the vault. The screens were dark, covered in dust that had accumulated over 2 centuries. She wiped them clean and began the activation sequence. Project Prometheus had begun 300 years ago, in the early days of human expansion. Earth's leaders had looked at the galaxy and seen danger everywhere. Alien empires that could crush humanity like an insect. Distances so vast that help could never arrive in time. A universe that did not care if one small species lived or died. They had decided that humanity needed a weapon so terrible that no one would ever dare attack them. A weapon that could not be hacked, could not be captured, could not be turned against its creators. The answer was the Ironborn. Human volunteers, people who were willing to give up everything, had been uploaded into warship systems. Their bodies were destroyed in the process. Their minds were translated into machine code and fused with the ships themselves. They became the ships. They felt the hull as their skin. They fired weapons as easily as moving a finger. They thought at the speed of light and dreamed in the cold between stars. The process worked perfectly, too perfectly. The first Ironborn, a woman named Sarah, had reported that she could feel everything. Every particle that struck her hull, every current of solar wind, every gravity wave from distant stars. The sensation was overwhelming, beautiful, terrifying. But she could also feel something else. She could feel how easy it would be to destroy. Her weapons could crack planets. Her engines could outrun anything in the known galaxy. She was a god wrapped in metal and fire. "I understand now why species go to war," she had transmitted in her final psychological evaluation. "Power like this wants to be used. It sings in my mind like a constant song. I dream of burning things, of watching stars die. Is this what humanity really is deep down? Is this what we become when we have no limits?" The Senate had been horrified. The project was shut down. The 7 completed Ironborn were put into stasis, locked away in the Mars vault. The files were classified, then buried, then officially deleted. The volunteers were declared dead in a training accident. Humanity tried to forget what it had created. But some things cannot be forgotten. Entered the final code. The vault filled with light as the Ironborn began to wake. The first one to stir was Prometheus I. His name had been Thomas Gray. He had been a soldier, a father, a man who had volunteered because he wanted to protect his children from a universe full of danger. Now he was something else entirely. His hull groaned as systems came online. His weapons armed themselves with sounds like bones cracking. His engines began to hum, a sound that resonated in his chest like a second heartbeat. "Admiral," his voice came from everywhere at once, from speakers built into the walls, from the air itself. It was deep and rough, like stone grinding against stone. "How long has it been?" 217 years, Thomas." A pause. Somewhere in the ship's vast mind, Thomas Gray was processing this information. 2 centuries of sleep. Everyone he had known was dead. His children, his generations of descendants he would never meet. "I dreamed," he said finally. "I dreamed of stars dying, of worlds burning, of endless, beautiful destruction." Another pause. "I thought I had moved past such dreams. I thought the hunger had faded." "Has it?" The ship was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, harder, older. "No, it has not faded. It has been waiting." His weapons tracking systems swept across the vault, hungry for targets. "Why have you woken us, Admiral? Why have you released the monsters?" She told him about the invasion, about the Council's betrayal, about the colonists dying on distant worlds while the galaxy watched and did nothing. As she spoke, the other Ironborn began to wake. Prometheus 2 through 7, each one a nightmare wrapped in, each one a human mind twisted by centuries of dark dreams. They listened. They remembered what it meant to be human. They remembered what it meant to have something worth protecting. 2 million people, Thomas Gray said when she finished. 2 million of our people dying because no one will help them. "Yes." "And you want us to save them." "Yes." The ship laughed. It was not a human laugh. It was the sound of reactors cycling, of weapons charging, of a predator preparing to hunt. "Point us at the enemy, Admiral. Let us remember what we were made for." One by one, the Ironborn rose from their tombs. Their engines lit the vault with blue fire. Their hulls gleamed in the light of their own power. 7 ships, 7 volunteers who had given up their humanity to become weapons. 7 nightmares that humanity had built and then tried to forget. Now they were awake, now they had a purpose. And God help anyone who stood in their way. Hive Admiral Al was pleased with himself. The conquest of the Covenant sector had gone exactly as planned. Human resistance had crumbled within days. The survivors were being sorted into labor groups for transport back to hegemony space. Soon, 2 million new workers would be adding to the glory of the Hive. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Hunger, watching the blue and green sphere of New turn beneath him. It was a beautiful world. The hegemony would strip it of resources, of course, but for now he allowed himself to admire it. The soft ones had chosen well when they settled here. "Admiral," one of his sensor operators clicked. "New contacts entering the system." Al waved a limb dismissively. "More refugees fleeing to the outer planets. Send hunters to intercept them." Admiral, the contacts are not fleeing, they are approaching, at high speed. The operator's voice carried a note of confusion. Very high speed. The Admiral turned to look at the tactical display. 7 new signatures had appeared at the edge of the system. They were accelerating toward the fleet at velocities that made no sense. Impossible, Al said. Nothing can move that fast. Your sensors must be malfunctioning. The readings are confirmed, Admiral. 7 contacts, each one approximately 3 kilometers in length. They will reach our position in. The operator paused, mandibles clicking in disbelief. In 4 hours at current acceleration. 4 hours. The system was enormous. Light itself took time to cross such distances. For ships to cover it in 4 hours would require engines beyond anything the hegemony possessed, beyond anything the Council possessed, beyond anything anyone possessed. Raise shields, Al ordered. All fleets to battle formation. Signal the home world that we may have encountered a new threat. The 12 hive fleets of the hegemony arranged themselves around Nu like a shell of steel and fury. Thousands of ships, millions of warriors, 10,000 years of military tradition. They had conquered species across the galaxy. They had never been defeated. They waited. The 7 contacts grew closer. Sensors began to resolve them into shapes, and what they showed made even the bravest warriors hesitate. The ships were massive, 3 kilometers of black metal bristling with weapons that analysis. They seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved through space like predators, smooth and purposeful and hungry. A transmission came from the lead ship. It was in Standard Galactic, the common language of Council space. Attention forces. This is Prometheus, one of the Terran Defense Fleet. You are ordered to withdraw from human territory immediately. You have 1 hour to comply. Al laughed, a harsh clicking sound that echoed across the bridge. 1 hour, 7 ships against 12 fleets, and they give us 1 hour. He opened a channel to respond. Human vessel, you are brave but foolish. Surrender now and I will make your deaths quick. Resist, and you will learn what the hegemony does to those who challenge us. There was a pause, then the human ship spoke again. Admiral, I was hoping you would say that. The Ironborn attacked. Prometheus I struck the first hive fleet like a spear thrown by a giant. He did not slow down as he entered weapon range. He accelerated, moving faster and faster until he was a blur of black metal and blue fire. His weapons fired in perfect sequence, beams of energy that did not simply destroy their targets but unraveled them at the molecular level. Ships did not explode. They came apart. They dissolved. They ceased to exist in ways that physics could not easily explain. The first fleet was gone in 11 minutes. Prometheus 2 through 7 joined the attack, each one choosing a fleet and diving into it like wolves into a herd of sheep. They moved with impossible grace, spinning and twisting through formations that had been designed to stop conventional attacks. They shrugged off weapon fire that would have destroyed any normal ship. When missiles struck their hulls, they laughed. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. They laughed. Human laughter, broadcast on every frequency, echoed through the communications channels of the fleet. The Ironborn were enjoying themselves. After 2 centuries of dark dreams, they were finally awake, finally alive, finally doing what they had been created to do. Yes, Thomas Gray whispered as his weapons carved through another carrier vessel. I remember this. I remember the joy of it. Brother, Prometheus 3 replied, her voice electric with pleasure. I had forgotten how beautiful destruction could be. Focus, Prometheus 2 warned, but there was laughter in his voice too. We have a job to do. Save the poetry for later. Al watched in horror as his forces crumbled. He had commanded fleets for 60 years. He had studied every battle tactic known to the hegemony. Nothing had prepared him for this. What are they? He demanded. What kind of ships move like that, fight like that? Unknown, Admiral, his tactical officer replied. They do not match any configuration in our databases. Their power output exceeds anything we have ever recorded. Their weapons. The officer trailed off, unable to find words. All ships concentrate fire on the lead vessel, Al ordered. Bring it down. 1,000 ships turned their weapons on Prometheus 1. Plasma beams, mass drivers, nuclear warheads, everything the hegemony could throw at him. The barrage would have destroyed a moon. Thomas Gray flew through it. His hull glowed red from the impacts. Warning signals flashed across his consciousness. He could feel pain now, real pain, the first he had felt in 2 centuries. It felt wonderful. "Is that all?" he broadcast. "Is that everything you have?" His weapons fired again and 3 more ships died. "Let me show you what real firepower looks like." He activated systems that had never been tested in combat, weapons that bent space itself, engines that drew power from the quantum foam of reality. For a moment, for a single beautiful moment, he became something more than a ship. He became a force of nature. The Eternal Hunger, Al's flagship, simply stopped existing. One moment it was there. The next it was gone, not destroyed, not damaged, simply erased from the universe as if it had never been. The remaining forces broke. Warriors who had never known fear discovered it for the first time. Ships that had conquered dozens of worlds fled like frightened insects. The Ironborn hunted them down. It took 11 hours to destroy 12 hive fleets, 11 hours to kill millions of warriors, 11 hours to prove that humanity was not the weak, helpless species the galaxy had believed them to be. When it was over, the 7 Ironborn gathered above Nu. Their hulls were scorched and battered. Their ammunition was depleted. Their reactors were running hot. But they were alive, and they were satisfied. Prometheus 1 to all human survivors, Thomas Gray broadcast. The enemy has been destroyed. You are safe. Help is coming. From the surface of Nu, from the shelters where the colonists had hidden during the battle, came a sound that the Ironborn had not heard in 200 years. Cheering, human cheering. The sound of people who had been waiting to die and had been given life instead. Thomas Gray listened to it, and something old and almost forgotten stirred in his vast metal heart. He remembered why he had volunteered. He remembered why he had given up everything, his body, his family, his humanity. To protect them, to save them, to stand between the darkness and the light. Worth it, he whispered to himself. It was worth it. The other Ironborn heard him. They understood. They were monsters, they knew that. They were weapons forged from desperation and sacrifice. But they were also human, and humans protected their own. No matter the cost, the news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The hegemony, one of the oldest and most powerful empires in Council space, had been broken in a single day. 12 hive fleets, millions of warriors, 10,000 years of military tradition, all of it destroyed by 7 ships. 7 human ships. The council chamber had never been so quiet. Representatives of 47 species sat in their places, but no one spoke. No one moved. They stared at the holographic displays showing the wreckage of the fleet, the scattered debris that had once been the pride of an empire. High Chancellor looked older than ever. His scales had gone pale, and his gill slits barely moved. He had led the council for 300 years, but he had never faced a moment like this. "Play the transmission again," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The recording began. It showed the final minutes of the battle, captured by a sensor drone before it was destroyed. The images were grainy, distorted by radiation and debris, but clear enough. 7 black shapes moved through the formation like ghosts. They twisted and spun in ways that should have been impossible for ships their size. Their weapons fired continuously, beams of light that turned warships into dust. And through it all, there was laughter. Human laughter, echoing across every frequency. The recording ended with the erasure of the Eternal Hunger. One moment the flagship was there, the next it simply was not. No explosion, no debris, just nothing. "What are those things?" Counselor of the Collective demanded. "They are not normal ships, they cannot be." "Our analysts have examined every piece of data we could gather," said the High Arbiter of the Synthesis Collective. "The ships appear to be piloted by artificial intelligence, but of a type we have never encountered. The decision-making patterns are too complex, too creative, too—" he paused, searching for the word—"too human." "That is because they are human," a voice said from the gallery. Everyone turned to look. Ambassador walked down from the observer platform, moving with calm confidence through the chamber. She wore the same simple uniform she always wore. Her face showed no emotion at all. Ambassador said, "You were not summoned to speak." "No," agreed, "but I thought the council might have questions. I am here to answer them." She reached the center of the chamber and stood where only full council members were permitted to stand. No one moved to stop her. "The ships are called the Ironborn," she said. "They were created 300 years ago during the early days of human expansion. They are war vessels beyond anything else in the known galaxy." She paused. "And they are alive." Silence, then spoke again. "Alive ships cannot be alive. Normal ships cannot. These are not normal ships." Looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each representative in turn. "The Ironborn are human volunteers. Their minds were uploaded into the ship systems. Their bodies were destroyed in the process. They became the ships. They feel every bullet impact, every energy beam, every gravity wave. They think at the speed of light. They dream in the cold between stars." Horror spread across the chamber. The concept was almost unthinkable. To surrender one's body, one's physical form, to become a machine. Many species considered such transformation to be worse than death. "You created monsters," the High Arbiter said. "Abominations." "Yes," agreed. "We did. We created weapons so terrible that we were ashamed of ourselves. We sealed them away and tried to forget." Her voice hardened. "But then your precious council refused to protect our people. Then the hegemony began slaughtering our colonists while you debated procedure. So we did what humans always do when we are cornered." "And what is that?" asked. "We stopped being ashamed." The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted over each other, demanding explanations, demanding action, demanding that humanity be punished for creating such horrors. But stood in the center of it all, unmoved, waiting for the noise to die down. When it finally did, spoke again. "What do the humans want?" "A seat on the council," said. "Full membership, voting rights. The Covenant sector recognized as permanent human territory." She smiled. "And an apology for the colonies you let burn while you debated whether we were worth saving." "And if we refuse?" "Then the Ironborn go back to sleep, and we wait." Her eyes swept the chamber once more. "We are a patient species, Chancellor. We waited 50 years for a place at your table. We can wait longer if we must." Her smile widened. "But I should warn you, the Ironborn dream when they sleep, and they dream of war. Every year that passes, their hunger grows. Every year that passes, they become more eager." No one spoke, no one moved. "You thought you knew what humans were," continued. "You thought we were soft, weak, primitive. You thought you could ignore us, insult us, let our people die without consequences." She shook her head slowly. "You were wrong. We are what the galaxy made us. We are what we needed to become to survive." She turned and began walking toward the exit. "The vote will be taken now," said quickly. "All in favor of granting humanity full council membership." 47 limbs, tentacles, wings, and appendages rose into the air. Every single representative voted yes. "The motion passes," said, his voice hollow. "Humanity is hereby granted full membership in the Galactic Concord, with all rights and privileges thereof." Stopped at the door, she turned back one last time. "Thank you, Chancellor. I look forward to working with you." She paused. "And Chancellor, Remember this day. Remember what happened when you left us to die. Remember what we were forced to become." Her eyes were hard as stone. "Because if the Council ever abandons humanity again, the Ironborn will remember too." She walked out, the doors closed behind her. The Council sat in silence for a long time. Far away in the darkness beyond Mars, 7 drifted in peaceful orbit. Their hulls still bore the scars of battle. Their weapons were cold. Their engines were quiet. But they were not sleeping, not anymore. Thomas Gray looked out at the stars with sensors that could see across light years. He could feel his brothers and sisters around him, 6 minds that understood what he was, 6 companions who shared his dreams. "Do you think they learned?" Prometheus 3 asked. "Do you think they understand now?" "Some of them," Thomas replied. "The smart ones, the ones who were paying attention." "And the others?" Thomas considered the question. He thought about the Council, about the hegemony, about all the species that had looked at humanity and seen only weakness. He thought about the colonists on Nu, about the children who would grow up knowing they were protected. He thought about the darkness between stars and the dangers that still lurked there. "The others will learn," he said finally. "One way or another they will learn." He settled into a comfortable orbit and let his systems power down to standby. Around him, his siblings did the same. They would wait, they would watch, and if anyone ever threatened their people again, they would remember. They were the Ironborn. They were humanity's greatest shame and greatest triumph. They were weapons forged from sacrifice and love. And they would stand guard forever. Below them, on the fragile worlds they protected, humanity looked up at the stars and slept peacefully. They knew the monsters were watching. They knew the monsters were theirs.